Hello everybody, namaskaram to all the beautiful people out there. Hope you guys are doing amazingly well. Welcome back to another lesson of English with Ashish. And guys, in this lesson, you know what's gonna happen. You know we are going to master past perfect continuous tense. We are going to learn everything about this tense. This is gonna be interesting, guys. I love this tense. You're gonna love it too. So let's talk about it. So let's understand when exactly do we have to use past perfect continuous tense. When do we need this tense? See guys, if you just look at the word past perfect continuous tense, it's past, done, perfect, completed, continuous means there was some continuity, tense means time, right? So we use past perfect continuous tense when we want to talk about an action that, look at this diagram, that started in the past at some point of time. We're talking about an action, just focus on this. We're talking about an action that started in the past and it continued for some time, it kept happening for some time, and then it stopped before another point, before an action in the past, which is basically a point of time in the past, right? So we focus on the fact that before a particular time in the past, an action had been happening for some time. Now, since it's past perfect, we can either talk about the starting point of the action or we can talk about how long it had been going on for, right? Let me give you an example. We had been playing games for 3 hours before my parents got home, right? I am talking about an action that had been going on in the past for 3 hours before it got stopped, before my parents got home, right? So here I'm talking about the time duration for which this action had been going on in the past before it stopped, before something else happened, right? Now, you can either talk about the time duration for which the action had been happening or the starting point of the action. If you want to talk about the starting point of this action, simply use since. We had been playing games since the morning or since 8 a.m. before my parents got home, right? If the time is already understood, somebody just wants to know what had been happening before a particular time. Just say, I had been playing games for 3 hours. I had been playing games since the morning, right? So now we know what exactly is past perfect continuous tense, how to use it, right? So guys, understand this. If we simply wanted to talk about an action that was going on in the past at some point of time, if we simply wanted to talk about it, we would use past continuous tense. We would never use this tense, but that's not the case. Here the focus is on the fact that something, an action had been going on before something else happened, right? Before a particular point of time in the past, an action had been going on, right? You can talk about its starting point, you can talk about how long it had been going on for as well, right? Now, let's talk about the different usages of this tense. It has only 2 usages. Number 1, to talk about an action that started in the past, continued for some time, and then it stopped. Look at the examples. Number 1, I had been waiting at the stand for 3 hours before the bus arrived, right? So before this happened, it happened in the past, the bus arrived. I had been doing something, an action had been going on, and it had been going on for 3 hours, right? I had been waiting at the stand. Something had been happening at the stand for 3 hours. I'm talking about the time duration for which this action had been going on, right? I had been waiting at the stand for 3 hours before the bus arrived, right? Second example, she had been working there since 2015 before she moved to Japan, right? So before moving to Japan, which is a particular point of time in the past, this action had been going on. Subject followed by, had been followed by the progressive form of a verb. It's very simple to form a past perfect continuous tense. Subject followed by, had been followed by a progressive form of a verb. It does not matter what the subject is, had been followed by a progressive form of a verb. She had been working there since 2015. This action had been happening and the starting point of this action is 2015. We use since to talk about the starting point of an action. She had been working there since 2015 before she moved to Japan, right? This is the point before which the action stopped, right? Third example. We had been partying like an animal when the raid happened. We had been partying like an animal, like a wild animal. We went wild when the raid happened, right? So this had been going on. This action, which is partying, this action had been going on. We'd been doing this action. We had been partying like an animal when the raid happened, right? So here we're not talking about the starting point of the action or how long this action had been going on for. You can do that. It's not necessary to talk about it. We generally talk about it, but it's your choice. If you do not want to talk about how long this action had been going on in the past or since when it started happening, it's all right. You can go without talking about it. All right. So this is usage number one, right? Just talk about an action that had been going on before a particular point of time in the past. Okay. Number two, to show a cause of something, which is basically a state of existence, a state of being, or sometimes an action in the past. All right, in the past. Look at the examples. She left the job as her manager had been troubling her for months. 4 months means many months. We're not talking about a particular time duration, 4 months. So the outcome is she left the job, right? This happened, this action happened. Now the question is why it happened, what is the cause of this action? This action happened because an action had been happening before this. Her manager had been troubling her for months, for many months. You can talk about the exact time duration as well. Her manager had been troubling her for 6 months, 3 months. You can talk about it. 4 months means for many months, all right? She left the job. Why? What is the cause for this? As her manager had been troubling her for months. All right, second example. We got really tired last night as we had been dancing since the evening. So this is the outcome, right? We were in a particular state of being, in a particular state of existence, which is we got really tired last night, right? Now, why it happened? What is the cause? Why did we get into that particular state of existence? Because we had been dancing since the evening. We got into this state of existence because something had been happening before this. We had been dancing since the evening, right? Before we actually got tired. Got the point? Third example. Jacob hadn't been studying well, so he failed the test. Something happened. What happened? He failed the test. Jacob failed the test. Now, why did he fail the test? What is the cause for this? He failed the test because he hadn't been doing something before it. He hadn't been studying well. So you can use past perfect continuous tense to talk about a cause of an action or a state of being in the past. This is important to note. In the past, you cannot use a past perfect continuous tense to talk about a cause for a present action. That's not the right usage of it, so don't do that, right? So that's how we use past perfect continuous tense. Now let's understand how to form sentences here, right? Affirmative sentences, positive sentences, very, very simple. Subject followed by had been, followed by a progressive form of a verb, followed by an object or modifier, which is optional. If the verb is transitive, you're going to have an object. If that is not the case, you will not have an object. You may have a modifier. That again depends on the context, right? Followed by for or since, followed by the time. The time before this action that had been going on in the past stopped. All right, that's how we form affirmative sentences. Negative sentences, just add not after had, the auxiliary verb had. That's it. That's all you have to do. Subject had not been, followed by a progressive form of a verb. Everything is just the same. I hadn't been studying before I slept. I hadn't been doing something before something else happened before I slept. We hadn't been doing anything when the teacher entered the class. We hadn't been doing anything, right? Had not is contracted into hadn't, right? That's how we form negative sentences. Interrogative sentences, first comes the auxiliary verb had, followed by the subject, been, the progressive form, and everything is just the same. At the end of the sentence, you need to have this question mark, right? Had you been sleeping for 2 hours before I called? Had you been sleeping for 2 hours before I called? Had you been doing anything when the teacher entered the class? Had you been doing anything when the teacher entered the class? That's not a very common question that we ask, but again, it's a situation that can arise. It's a question that you might need to ask. All right. Now, if you want to ask an interrogative negative sentence, just add not after the subject. Had you not been sleeping for 2 hours before I called? Had you not been doing anything when the teacher entered the class? Right. So that's how we form sentences in past perfect continuous tense. I hope you got this. All right. Now let's understand this. Not in just past perfect continuous tense, in any continuous tense, in any progressive tenses, we cannot use stative verbs. Stative verbs are the verbs that are used to show a state of being of a person or a thing, right? We cannot use stative verbs in continuous tenses. So verbs like, love, hate, you cannot use these verbs in continuous tenses. You cannot say, I had been loving you, I had been liking you, I had been hating you. You cannot do that. Love, like, hate, and other verbs, other stative verbs are the verbs that are used to show a state of being of a person. All right. So don't use these verbs in progressive, in continuous tenses. Okay. So I hope you've understood what this tense is all about, how to use this tense. Let me tell you again. If you simply wanted to talk about an action that was going on in the past at a particular point of time, use past continuous tense. I was working on a project last night. I was hanging out with my friends last night, right? If you simply want to talk about what was going on in the past at a particular point of time. Now, if you want to talk about an action that started in the past, continued for some time, and then stopped before another action, before a particular point, use past perfect continuous tense. I had been playing games before my mother came, all right? We'd been working on a project for 3 hours before we moved outside, right? So that's how we use this tense. I hope you got this. So that's all about today's lesson, guys. If you enjoyed this lesson, give it a thumbs up. And if you guys have any questions, any doubts, do let me know in the comment section below. And I will see you guys very soon. Till then, keep learning, have fun. I love you all. You know this. I'm out. Peace.